Hello and welcome to this section of the Chemistry Tutor. In this section we're going to cover the topic of what we call atomic number, mass number, and the concept of an isotope. So what we're going to be doing is studying about the elements of the periodic table and really diving inside the atom and understanding what these things are. So this entire lecture is going to be centered around making sure you understand these three topics because they're very, very, very important. Now, a lot of the things that we're going to be talking about in this section are going to be dealing about what is inside of the atom. And so I know a lot of people watching this entire video series, they're just taking a class. They're just taking it because maybe they have to. Some people are more interested in it than maybe other people. But I want you to take a step back and really think about what you're learning. You're living in a time when you can put a video on in front of you or pick up a book or turn on the internet and learn about things and understand things that people for hundreds of years were trying to understand. Many people spent their entire lives trying to understand what was inside of an atom, what made atoms different, how do they combine, things like that. So if it's a little bit frustrating to you learning all of these definitions and trying to make sure you get them all straight in your head, just take a deep breath and realize, hey, you've got it a lot easier than some of these people that spent 40 years, maybe back when they lived a couple hundred years ago, to barely understand just one of these concepts. And here in the next half an hour to an hour, we're going to explore all of them at once, and you'll understand it with crystal clarity, and you'll know that it is fact, okay? So I guess I want to preface this because it's really amazing, interesting stuff that we can sit here and talk about what's inside of an atom. And we're standing on the shoulders of everybody before us who did these experiments and who studied these things. And so I'm trying to break it down for you so that you'll go on and achieve your goals in life and in school. But just keep that in mind. You're learning things now that are just people 100 years ago, 150 years ago would have just loved to be able to pick up a book or watch a video and really understand the truth in the universe. So let's get going. We've talked about this before. We have this periodic table of the elements. We're going to do a lesson here shortly that's going to cover the periodic table and how it's organized here in a little bit. But for now, all of you are probably taking a class and you have a textbook. So in the front of that textbook, flip to it and you'll see the periodic table of the elements. I'll tell you why it's organized the way it is a little bit later on, but basically you see all the different symbols, the chemical symbols, and there are some numbers inside of the periodic table. We'll get to all that stuff a little bit later. But basically every element, every pure element is listed on this periodic table. And we have already talked about this a little bit, but I think you already know that every element, hydrogen, oxygen, carbon, all of them, they're composed of atoms. And these atoms are obviously slightly different from one another. A carbon atom is slightly different from an oxygen atom. And an oxygen atom is slightly different from an iron atom. And an iron atom is different from a uranium atom. They're all different. But what this section is going to cover is how are they different? Because that's really going to eventually drive how the chemistry happens. So let's talk a little bit about what's inside the atom. We've talked about this a little bit before. Atoms are made up of three things, and I'm going to draw you a picture here on the board. And I think most of you already know this, but we'll cover it again. Atoms are made of three things, three main building blocks. We have protons, which are positive charged objects in the nucleus, in the center of the atom. We have neutrons in the center of the atom that hang out with the protons, but they don't have any charge. And then we have electrons, which are kind of orbiting around. You can almost think of it like a solar system. They're kind of whizzing around on the outside. They have a negative charge. Now this picture of the atom works pretty good for chemistry, but when you really get and study atoms in detail, it's not quite so clear-cut that that's really the way that they're put together. But it's good enough for chemistry class to visualize these electrons kind of going around like this, and they have negative charge, and the center in the nucleus has the positive charge. So if we were going to draw an atom, the simplest atom that we could possibly draw would be a hydrogen atom. So this is a flammable gas. It's used in rocket fuel. We fill the Hindenburg up with hydrogen gas. And it's actually the simplest gas. So let's go ahead and draw the hydrogen atom, right? So what we're going to have here is in the center, in the nucleus, the hydrogen atom is very simple. We have one proton, and I'm going to symbolize this with a P+. That means proton. So I'm going to make sure you understand that by actually writing proton here. But the symbol for a proton that you're typically going to see in your book is a P with a plus. or maybe just a P by itself. The plus means it has positive charge. So I have a little circle representing the proton, has a positive charge, and basically that's it. That's all that's in the center of a pure hydrogen atom. All right, now what do we have on the outside of a hydrogen atom? We have another object. I'm going to put a little negative sign in there because it has a negative charge. And I'm going to put an E with a little negative sign floating out here. And just to make sure you understand, I think you all do, this is an electron. Right? Now this electron, like I said, it's overly simplified, but you can think about this electron just kind of orbiting this proton. So it just goes round and round and round and round. Now your body is got billions and trillions of electrons and protons, and they're all doing their thing down there at the atomic level. So they're all whizzing around and doing their thing here. So we have a positive charge in the center and we have a negative charge on the outside. There are no neutrons in a pure hydrogen atom. We'll talk about that here in just a few minutes.